Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever, however you are joining us. This is the I Speak Jeep podcast presented by SFJ4x4.com. My name is Neil with Simpson Family Jeeps, and I am joined in Grandma's couch studio by a decorated cast and crew.
By that guy over there, Jeff Tremonte, the producer, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. And then the mad scientist over there, Scott Brown.
Wow, we're off to a banger.
Well, honestly, I was very invested in the story you were telling before we went on air, and then we went live, and you just had to stop talking.
I just had to stop,
and now I'm left on this cliffhanger.
You're left on the cliffhanger.
Yeah,
well, I will bring in our listeners, our loved ones, our Jeep and off-road and automotive enthusiast friends and family that I was having a moment with the Savage before, we came on air. We were reading and responding to YouTube comments, which we do virtually to the majority of them. So we encourage you to jump on, watch and leave a comment. We typically like more positive comments, but I don't know, for whatever reason, YouTube loves to bring out everything.
The best in everyone.
The best in everyone. So one of the videos was from a wheeling how-to. It was a pretty successful video, and it was a lot of fun. We went out to Oil City, Pennsylvania, and we did the 10 mile for 2 mile kind of charity-ish run. And, we did an instructional video, got to hang out with OVJ and shoot some how-to videos on kind of what to look for. And for the most part, that video has overwhelmingly had positive responses. Like, people like, oh, I didn't even think about that. I'm glad you brought that up, and I should look for that, and I should check this out on my vehicle, that kind of stuff. But we were just reading a comment where I must have used one of my signature kind of quirky words, and the person was first chastising me for
you insulted him.
My quirky word choices.
Thank goodness I wasn't on.
Oh my God! Right? It would have roasted you. It would have roasted you for your ineptitude of
there's
vernacular.
Way more Scottisms than Neelisms.
Oh my gosh! I mean, I got roasted for hubbub or jibber jabber or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So he was upset about that. This individual was upset about that, and then was offended by my Crocs and socks and my big brimmed hat.
Obviously, it's really affected you because now you're in boot stomping boots.
I am in the world's best pair of boots. First and foremost, because I don't think I've ever had this expensive of a pair of boots in my possession in my life.
Probably true.
Period. First and foremost. Second of all, it was free thanks to Jeff the Italian Stallion and family.
Yeah.
So I am like, this is like a mecca for
Yes.
my dogs. Or my dogs are barking, and this is like just a retreat for them in this beautiful pair of Rockports, which I don't even want to wear outside. Like, I don't. For those of you who are listening at home, I have this, like, it's a nice looking boot. It's well constructed, and long story short, Jeff's family works in a place, and they were going to throw out a pair of boots, and it just serendipitously were my size.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jeff brought him in and was like, was anybody here wear this size shoe, a 13 wide? I mean, how specific is that? And I was like...
And you're like, I do. And as you were showing me, your shoes were just, the soles were falling off of them.
Literally. I was walking the soles out of those shoes.
I think there was a third of the sole left attached.
Yeah. I think I could still super glue those shoes together.
Just let them go.
Just let them go.
Let them go. Let it go. So I'm wearing these boots, not because I don't want to have my Crocs. I wore my Crocs out into the snow this morning.
That's bad choices.
It was bad choices.
I'm going to just make an analogy here that's going to hurt your soul. But a long time ago, I learned this lesson.
Oh my God.
And this is that shoes are worth the price that you have to pay for them. And the analogy I'm going to make is, it's like rubber for your Jeep. You gotta put good rubber on the foundation.
But Patagonias get the job done for some folks, and they will defend that to the day they die.
Yeah.
Long live the Croc. Long live the
still better rubber
Patagonias.
than a pair of Crocs or the shoes that had no sole left hanging on.
Fair.
So anyways, into the comments. Roy saying good morning. Giaga Jeepers, good morning. Bill, good morning. Eric, good morning. And Giaga Jeepers, if you find boots you like, go buy a second pair By the time you wear those out, you'll never find another pair like them.
That's
That is
good.
so
That's
true.
life
So true.
advice.
That
Good
is
life
so
advice.
true.
Good morning to all of you, and thank you for joining us. It's important to note as we get started on our day that if you are listening in your ear hole somewhere in the world out of 70 plus countries, first and foremost, we thank you for prioritizing this experience as what you find for your infotainment. So if you're driving truck across a continent somewhere, or working on a supply line or whatever it is, or just working out at the gym, we value you and we thank you for being a valuable part of this OG Jeep family. Now, with that said, you too can join us live on the Book of Faces or YouTube every Monday, or nearly every Monday at 10:19 a.m., where you too can jump into the comments and, share with the other folks there, maybe get a shout out online, whatever it might be.
Try to get first.
Try to get first. We
Which
appreciate
Roy was first.
Yep, Roy got first. It's always a competitive action or activity there for folks who are logging on.
Joe actually just commented, Vasco Sundowners, best hiking boot I've ever had, courtesy of the National Park Service.
Good job.
I've never
MPS.
I've never heard of those boots, and
I don't-
obviously I can't pronounce it, but it sounds like they're pretty good boots.
Sounds like they're good boots. Thank you for the National Park Service for that as well. I actually reached out to Joe on something funny. I know he messaged me back, but I haven't had a chance. We've been on air for our other, the American Hustle program. And speaking of, and for our listeners at home and for our viewers, we are going to start adding some segments that are only going to be available for our listeners at home, some shorts or some minis. So if you are a person who primarily joins us via watching on Facebook or YouTube, know that we really want to encourage you to head over to the your favorite streaming platform and catch up on some of those additional little in-between episodes that will be happening soon. Likewise, we have some cool interviews, some special interest stories. I think we'll actually be bringing you a special interest story next week. Or was that this week?
I thought it was today. Like
It's
I was
today.
scrambling before the episode, trying to
today.
make sure we had it
Do
ready.
you have it ready?
I do.
Oh, good. We have it today. Today's a special interest. So, with that said, we need to get to our topic, which is a continuation from last week.
Yep.
Which Jeffrey has aptly titled this today's program "Fuel Squared."
Mm-hmm.
But basically, we had gotten through the history primarily of petrol-based fuel into the formulation of gasoline,
Mm-hmm.
right? And kind of some historical context and relevancy, and kind of the manner in which oversimplified, but how it works within your vehicle. And we had really kind of started to scratch the surface of additives.
Mm-hmm.
And realistically, we want to give just a brief shout out to maybe an LPG or electric and maybe hydrogen, and just kind of talk about what are some other potential fuel sources for vehicles. And so kind of buckle up. We got about 40 minutes or so to kind of unpack that for folks who are at home listening, and we'll go from there.
So, like always, I went vintage,
Of
And-
course you
and-
did.
and,
Fuel
uh,
additives vintage?
sort of.
Okay.
How it affects our vintage vehicles, since you can't get ethanol-free fuel very easily anymore.
Okay.
So I have had a really good friend that he swore by what he called Alky Buster.
Alky Buster.
Alky Buster.
Is that actually a name brand product?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, that was a Waldism.
Oh, okay. Well, of course it is. Love old man talk.
And basically, the actual way you say it is ethanol remover. And what would you say you think that does before I tell you what it does?
Well, okay. Wait a second. So I use Startron religiously.
Yes.
Now, what
Do
I
you
think
know what it actually does?
So what I understand that it does is that the chemical is okay. So here's the science I think I know about Startron.
Okay.
Right? That it bonds at a molecular level with the
So there's magic.
water molecules. It's not magic.
It bonds with things.
It bonds. It's a chemical that bonds with the water molecules specifically present in ethanol of some capacity.
Okay. So what it
He
actually
didn't like
does-
my answer.
No, he didn't.
He didn't like my answer.
But to be fair, you also stalled so long before you gave your answer that I don't believe you knew an answer either. I feel like you were just trying to make it up as you went.
So ethanol remover.
well, I was trying to remember if it's water molecule or if there's something else in ethanol that
What is a water molecule?
we use H2O. Well, it's multiple things, right? But
Anywho's.
it's a dehydrator. So I understand the Startron is a
There
dehydrator
we
of
go.
ethanol.
Nope.
And it bonds and it dehydrates the ethanol. And that's
Nope.
what you can't I was trying to remember if you're dehydrating water
No.
out of the ethanol.
Doesn't actually do that.
Okay.
Ethanol remover does not remove ethanol. We'll just get that out of the way right now. You cannot remove it effectively after it's put in. So
Right.
all you can do is mitigate it.
Right.
So that's my first big word. There's a bunch. I apologize in
Oh,
advance. I'm going to do
man.
my
This is
best.
gonna be a great
man,
episode. I can't.
But so Scott, I'm going to stop you. You clearly told him he was wrong, but then you agreed with what he was saying.
Right,
No.
you're not getting
Ethanol-
rid of
he's
the
not getting
ethanol.
rid of
I'm not
ethanol.
getting rid of it.
He's getting rid of water.
He said it absorbed it. And it
Absorbed
doesn't-
water.
It doesn't do that.
Okay. All right. Lay it on us.
So all it does actually is disperse the water droplets that are in the fuel throughout the fuel. And the idea is that because you are now dealing with smaller droplets that is very well dispersed, now it can burn it through without having a pocket of water.
Okay. So I wasn't that far off. But I can accept that I wasn't right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine.
And it also prevents corrosion, gum buildup, and water absorption. So it can't get rid of the water that's in the fuel, but it prevents more water to get into the fuel. But it doesn't actually say how it does
Going back
that.
to the dehydration.
But the dehydration is removing water. This just prevents water to get in.
So it's repelling the water, kind of
Correct.
like.
But
it's
how
like
is it
putting
then
camp
making
dry
it
on
a
your gas
pocket?
tank?
Then how's it making a pocket of? You see, I'm having a hard time buying this.
Is this like
This is
dropping
why
oil in
people-
boiling water, and you see the oil just disperse into multiple little droplets?
So I actually dispersants, that's my first big word.
That's the second
I
big
think
word.
I
Just so you know,
think
you
I
said
kinda did-
mitigated already.
I think I did all right with that one.
Yeah, you did good. You did
They
good
actually
with
use that
dispersants.
with oil spills to disperse the oil throughout
So
the
take
water.
the saturation and
Correct.
break it up some.
But the part I thought was most interesting is we're not actually getting rid of it. We're
Right.
just making it more parts per million.
Yes.
So now it's better.
Yes. Well, and
We're
that's
just actually producing more.
Wouldn't it be less parts per million?
no. You're making more because you're taking less, which is say
You're
if I had
taking,
one part of 100 and
yeah.
I'm breaking it now into 10 parts, now I've got
The
10
molecule
parts
size
per
is
100.
getting smaller, or not the molecule size. The amount is getting smaller,
Right.
but it actually is not removing it or getting rid of it. It's just making it over a more broad area.
I'm following because I also buy
but
buy the product that
I don't feel like that changes the parts per million though.
it doesn't change the density of the parts. It does not change the density. I think that's where you're
Yeah,
thinking of it
that's-
right now. That's your brain as density. Because if I still have 1 per 100 and all I'm doing is breaking it down now, the density is still the same. I still have the
Yes.
same volume.
Right.
I'm just spreading it out over.
And so now we
Instead of
say,
one little pocket
okay,
over here, I now have it spread out over the 100.
and now I'm going to take a
that's where I
reading.
felt like it would be less that density conversation, because if you spread it over instead of 100, now it's over 1,000.
Right.
You have 1 per 1,000 instead of 1 per 100.
Right, but we didn't change the quantity. We didn't change the 100. We just took a cube of the 100
Yep.
and we broke it down and we added a little bit of fuel back into there and we spread, instead of 1 out of 100, now we have 1 in every 100.
In the case of like an oil spill, so you're dispersing it. So now you're going to go in and you're going to read a foot by foot by foot squared area. That's going to have less oil present. But that's because you removed it from there and you moved it over somewhere else that
and
didn't
you
have
didn't
it.
remove it in its entirety. You just lowered the volume of the oil present in that foot
In
by
that
foot,
foot
and you
by foot
spread it
square.
out into a larger space.
Correct.
Yep. All right. So overall, of course, the issue with our gas can or gas tank, I mean, for me, I obsessively use this product every single time in all of my small equipment.
Wait. Joe has a case of dehydrated water from his Y2K preparations.
Joe, I agree.
Just add water.
Just add water.
That's what I want to know.
Anyway, and then there's also detergents. And no, this is not Tide. There's no Tide Pods in your ethanol
but is there
remover.
Dawn dish soap?
No.
Oh, well,
It
there
is
isn't
a-
oil spills.
It is a chemical additive that cleans fuel and fuel. Basically, it's fuel injection cleaner.
Yes.
And then there's antioxidants, which protects
I take
From corrosion.
antioxidants in my vitamins in the morning.
Right?
so you don't rust.
Oh. I think we're different. I think we're doing it with different antioxidants.
So
Mine, so I don't rust, but there's
So
metal in my body.
That is probably true. That is true.
there's probably metal in my body too, but
Well,
it's-
yours is from grinding
Grinding and cutting
and
things.
small metal particulates like Greg.
yes,
Jeff actually had surgery to have pins and plates and stuff put in.
yes. Mine was more involuntary. His is voluntary.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Anyway, so then it made me go down the rabbit hole of ethanol-free fuel, something that you're going to go to the pump and you're going to pay more for, like I've done.
Thank you, Country Fair and Sitco. That's who I can kind of immediately think
Yeah,
of.
I
I think
would agree.
Sheets might have an ethanol.
There's more and more, thankfully.
I think it
Okay.
depends on the station, but not all
Yeah.
sheets.
Okay, fair.
And-
Co-Fair, Country Fair definitely is one, right? That's do you not?
They did a big thing for a while. I don't know that that's still.
Locally, it's Sunoco and Shell.
Okay, I know Country Fair in Pennsylvania is a big ethanol-free pump. They must have it in their supply chain somewhere.
And I was very happy that Sunoco popped up on the way to and from a car show.
Okay,
So it's very convenient for me.
okay. And did you find an ethanol-free pump?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
Sunoco's you did a big thing on it for a while too.
Oh, see, I couldn't tell you where a Sunoco is right now.
And it's a small mom and pop fuel station right on Lake Road. So
Okay.
can't beat it. Anywho's,
That's a Sunoco up there?
yeah, it is now.
Oh, okay. I was thinking it was another Shell station.
Nope.
Oh, okay. My bad. I was confused.
So
You
that
offended the shells. across
Yes.
the nation?
right.
Yes.
Whoa.
people are making their camps right,
Right.
now.
People are making their camps.
Yeah,
they're
they're-
digging in their heels because Shell has, as we mentioned, the V Power
Yeah.
Yes. So
formulation.
what
V-Power.
ethanol-free fuel at the pump means is never been blended with ethanol. So they're actually separate container, separate tank, the whole 9 yards. That's one of the reasons why you're paying more.
It's like a vegan plate.
Well, yeah. It's
It's never been cooked with
yes, it's
with
a
meat.
kosher.
It's
pump.
a kosher.
Yeah.
Oh God! Now, well, if you weren't miffed about Shell and Sunoco, some rabbi out there has just cast this off. There we go.
That's whatever.
Okay.
I just mean that you have to have everything separate. You have to have 2 stoves and 2 fridges and everything else.
Is-
Well, it's kind of what's going on with ethanol-free fuel. Is you have to have a special container for it in the truck. You have to have a
Yes.
special container in the ground
gets
for
its
it.
own pump handle.
Called pump handle. There's no cross contamination, which made me feel a little bit better about all the money I spent this last summer with ethanol-free fuel.
Prioritizing ethanol-free fuel.
But what I took away from it is if you have the option, if you have a vintage vehicle with a carburetor,
Yep.
you should just go ahead and buy ethanol-free fuel if you can.
Yes.
If you can't, then StarTron, couple, I think Stable has a version.
Yes.
Lucas has a version. I personally have used the Lucas myself.
I have a question about additives.
Oh, buddy, he's gonna.
Can I finish my thought
I want to
first?
finish
Go
the
ahead.
thought.
That is a good backup plan, but
Right.
but you're not actually removing it. So it's never going to be as good as the ethanol-free fuel. If you can get ethanol-free fuel and put a stabilizer in there, which is going to help it not break down over time,
Mm-hmm.
that is going to be your best bet for your carbureted vehicles or small engines or that kind of thing. So
Right.
feel a little bit better about spending a little bit more, like $1 or more a gallon.
Right. Yeah, and before you get into it exactly, I know Jeffrey's over there salivating because we had an interesting inquiry. I'm assuming that's where you're going with
No.
this. Oh.
No, this is separate from that.
Oh, well, you know what? I will hold on to my sentiment because of how I utilize StarTron and because I don't mind burning ethanol gas, which again is typically 10% or less of your standard pump mixture.
Well,
if
by
I
the time
recall.
you get something with a carburetor, it's already near death. So
Well,
it's just a buck up.
I'm simply saying
Buttercup.
in my personal daily drivers. First of all,
He doesn't have any carburetor personal daily.
I love old vintage pieces of garbage that I
Yes.
can just kind of and make them kind of give me
Yes.
a little bit
And
more
it
of their
does help
second
that
wind.
most have F heads or L heads that will literally
Basically
run
on anything.
anything. So you're
Yes.
good to go.
Yes.
You got contaminated fuel, put it in the flat fender.
I
It's
was
fine.
talking about my personal daily driver vehicles that I'm not. I've certainly been asked before, should I be running ethanol free in a daily? Right? I've had
Yeah.
that conversation from people,
I'm too cheap for that.
and that's exactly what it comes down to. Is if you're going to see a discernible gain in miles per gallon for the amount that you're spending, then sure, go ahead and do that.
They're supposed to, is what the claims I read this morning.
I would say the life and maintenance, you may see a discernible difference, but that's over the lifetime of the vehicle. I don't think in the short term that you're gaining anything.
It's exact. I agree entirely that is a longitudinal perspective versus your short term gain, and for the most part, most people at this point in time, and I have not pulled an average national statistic, but I think our vehicle ownership is down to 3 to 5 years on national average.
I would agree.
It's low. It used to be like 11 to 15.
I'm doing
like
my part
30
actually-
years ago.
So
or
it's
something.
actually starting to go back up again right now.
okay.
But
That's normal
I
in
would say that
recessionary
it is.
trends.
I would say that it is still in that
That
lower range.
that lower single digits. But regardless, you're not going to see the mechanical gain of miles per gallon and the better value of your vehicle unless you're holding on to it for that extended period of time.
Right.
If you're just owning it for 3 to 5 years, realistically, that fuel system, that's the problem of the second and the third and the fourth owner.
I mean, how I look at it is, was that fuel system ever designed with the idea of having the possibility of some ethanol in the fuel? So on my LS Swap C10, it gets whatever the pump pumps out.
Sure.
My Gladiator, it gets whatever the pump pumps out. On my 36, that old style carburetor, that was never ever designed with the idea of ethanol. So you're going to have something, the car is going to lack somewhere.
Sure.
And while I agree with you, that's also not meant to be a daily driver.
Sort of.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you're
What you're willing to subject yourself to is different than what is
General
by modern
society.
days expectation. And this
Correct.
is a conversation we always have to have customers who come to us and say, I would like to daily drive this vintage vehicle.
Yes.
And the problem is in 1936, what you did on a daily as your daily driver was simply different than what we do in 2025.
It is true.
And that is I don't care if it's 1978. What and how people drove vehicles in 1978 is simply different than how we drive, where we drive, how fast we drive, the on and off, the constant in and out, because we're running into 18 different kids' practices and grocery stores and blah, 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 blah. The expectation for daily driving now is simply different than it was, 30, 40, 50 plus years ago.
Now, one thing that I think is cool is specifically with vintage Jeeps, because there is just such a plethora of
He did so good.
I'm trying, really
all
trying.
the other
good.
words were so good.
I was really close. He was literally just one sound off.
Yeah. But because you can easily fuel inject pretty much any vintage Jeep,
Yes.
even the hard to do ones like a flat fender, you actually can if you talk to us. We have the secret sauce. So you're already, you're getting a fuel pump in the tank. You're getting
Electric fuel pump.
a better, you're actually getting fuel injection instead of a carburetor. Now, when that happens, now you can pretty much put whatever you want in it.
Yes.
It's purely because on the 36 specifically, for some unforeseen reason, there is no fuel injection option easily adaptable to a flathead.
Yeah.
Why?
Considering that's a very well, and it's interesting because the flathead for the longest time was this obscure. People didn't want to do anything with it.
Yeah.
And now it's actually a status symbol. It's like it's a cool factor.
So I'm looking at you, Holly.
yeah.
You can buy a 1 barrel for your 206 in your Mustang
Right.
that you should have took out and put a 289 in,
Yes.
but I can't buy a 2 barrel for my flathead.
Right.
I am confused.
I do want to go back. I need you to remember your thought. Don't lose it.
I
Okay.
still want to know my question.
All right. Hold on to it. I want to put on the record that in Scott's defense, plethora is a very challenging word because how often in the English language do we go P and L next to each other?
It's fair.
Place is, I mean, maybe.
Plural.
Okay, you know what? I take it back.
But that sounds completely different than the other word.
With the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, I think, or consonant. It was not even a syllable. It was
I
a
don't
consonant.
remember what reel it is where the guy is just changing one letter and the sound completely changes. That is my problem.
Synapse misfire in the brain bank there.
So
all right,
anyway.
Jeffrey. All right.
All right.
Bring us back on track.
So
here.
at the beginning, Scott started naming off what all the different additives do.
Yes.
And then we talked a little bit about the ethanol removers and things like that, what
Yes.
you should put into the carburetors versus fuel injected. Okay, we're all on the same page here.
Okay.
What was Marvel Mystery Oil?
I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. It's the same thing as seafoam? I don't know.
Nobody knows.
You know what? Let me tell you a story about this couch we're sitting on right here. My grandma Simpson made
I definitely
the best.
used it. That's why I'm asking.
Made the best potato salad. I mean, her potato salad was unmatched. It just simply is one of those things that nothing
I
ever
think you're
tastes.
slightly biased.
Nothing
No,
ever tastes as good as my
I
grandma's potato
understand
salad, right? She left my sister the recipe. The sister, the interview we'll be giving today, gave her, left the recipe to her. To my knowledge, had it almost in its entirety. Now, grandma sometimes did a little pinch of this and a little pinch of that, right? Much as many good cooks do. But I am convinced to this day that my grandma was just spitting in the potato salad because no matter what we do, it never tastes the same. And so I think Marvel Mystery Oil is just somebody's byproduct of something or other. It's the way that seafoam works. I don't know. I poured seafoam into every tank when I was a teenager.
I think
Marvels, you can literally put it in the oil, put it in the
everywhere.
gas. Huh?
Yep.
it's everywhere. I think
everywhere.
I think it's a one hand off.
You take a bath, you scrub your armpits
I
with
mean,
it.
might heal something there. But it's the last thing that came off the back of a little wagon drawn by ponies. It will cure everything.
And it's a cure-all.
Yeah.
It is.
I mean, it is the most fantastic snake oil of the automotive industry.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I'm not knocking it because again, I am equating it entirely with seafoam, which I wholeheartedly believe in. And I don't even know what the heck they do.
Your sister just said she made it with her to learn, and it's still not the same. For the potato salad.
That's the potato
she
salad
slipped
conversation.
something in when she wasn't looking.
That's right. She just spits in it, and that's what made the potato salad stick out.
You
And the
can't-
Marvel Mystery Oil is just
She had the secret ingredient on her skin in her hand, so as she's mixing it.
No, you know what it was? You just can't replace grandma love.
that's right.
There it is.
That's right. It's a mystery. That's a Marvel Mystery Oil. It's a mystery. And seafoam. Who even named that?
Right?
You know, like it's
So I had the best conversation with a guy in a junkyard once that swore that all those were kerosene.
oh, I've heard that before. I also heard watered down ATF. Would you would use like a watered down ATF. I don't know a
Yeah.
better way to say it. It just has a high level of solvency. It has a base level of lubricity. It's not a lubricant.
According to the comments, your sister's willing to come in and teach us how those molecules break down and actually explain all of the science to us.
Ooh.
That's probably kind of on point. That's of value.
Only
She should be teaching high school right now.
yeah, she
Just
should.
so we're all on the same. I would love if we were like on air at the high school, like in
right.
her
Well,
class.
maybe we are.
We're the science lesson
We're the
today.
science lesson.
I'm so sorry, kids. Listen to your teacher. We're not the answer here.
Fuel additives and chemicals in modern automotive. But I was going to say, I do want to circle back, and it kind of has this conversation with additives. And there is value in application. And because I was going to mention with small engines.
Yep.
And I want to bring this back to base level of what we talked about last podcast. And again, you know what? Maybe I should have said this at the beginning. If you feel like we've jumped in 2 feet first, make sure you go back and listen to the last podcast because that kind of sets the stage for the conversations we're having today. But when you are dealing with high performance, you run a higher octane rating, in which we obviously mentioned octane is not actually in the fuel itself. It is an equivalency of combustion.
Yep.
So the thing with that is that we have that as a kind of an explanation for our tolerances are just, lesser in our standard 87 equipped vehicles. Unless it tells you to run, premium fuel, you don't have to, so on and so forth. Small engines, so your small landscape equipment, and other things that are not necessarily, doing a 2-cycle mix, so on and so forth, but still not a bad choice there, are a higher compression engine.
Mm-hmm.
And so in higher compression environments, it behaves similarly to a performance-driven engine.
Well, you're expecting a small cubic inch to give you a significant amount of power.
Correct.
Even though it doesn't sound like it, the fact that you can get something, piston so small and be able to power such big equipment, you're asking more of it.
Correct.
It has to be more efficient. And another thing I have noticed specifically with small engines is the newer you go, the more plastic parts you're going to have in the fuel system. Everybody's known about plastic fuel tanks. That's probably been our lifetime.
Yep.
Grandpa had an old rototiller with a metal gas tank on it somewhere, but now they're even going as far as the carburetors are mostly plastic because they're tired of people gumming them up and over winter and
Right.
then complaining next spring.
So I want to break that down, right? And
Yep.
I want to kind of lay some stuff out. And so where I was going with the small engine and the higher compression and how it behaves similar to a performance-driven application is the fact that you want to typically run a higher octane rated fuel. Now, I had a friend in the landscape industry, and he went through fuel so fast, it didn't make sense to run a higher octane rated fuel for how fast and for how often he was running the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
For the average bear, my secret sauce is premium fuel and Startron, or an ethanol dehydrator, which is what I'll call an ethanol dehydrator. You'll call it a disperser, I suppose.
I'm just telling you what they said it was.
I understand. and so the idea is that my equipment runs for a nominal period of time,
Mm-hmm.
and then it gets stored or stowed for a unintended period of time. I don't know how long. Now the piece is, so I try to use the best possible fuel I have available to me with an additive that is meant to kind of disperse that ethanol to break it down in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately, while the machine is running, you want to turn off the fuel if possible.
Yep.
And allow the carburetor bowl to run dry.
Yep.
And basically, you're starving the fuel system. And when I don't want to say fuel injection, obviously you're not injecting it, but you're trying to run that fuel system dry so that we don't have that fuel sitting stagnant in that small carburetor.
Yes.
Or any other part of the way to being combusted.
Mm-hmm.
Because we know that sustained exposure to the inside of small gas tanks or carburetors, that moisture that is naturally present in fuel will break down the inside, oxidizing it, turning it to rust, and gumming everything up in the process.
Yes. Or white powder if it's aluminum.
Or white powder if it's aluminum. And many of our small engine carburetors are aluminum or have have portions of aluminum
Which
in
is
them.
what I was describing is now becoming plastic. Like I have a newer pressure washer. Its whole thing is plastic. And, everything. It's kind of funny. I take care of vehicles relatively where Neil tries to get every ounce of life out of everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's the opposite for him with small engines.
Yes.
And I
Isn't
take
that
the
funny?
reins.
That's so true.
I take every last breath out of the little engine.
That is so true. We flip-flop on that,
Yes,
don't we?
because my pressure washer refuses to start. So I ether. I almost never use ether.
Oh, God.
I ether the crap out of it, and then finally get it to run. And if it doesn't, I'm banging on it with a screwdriver. Oil changes may or may not happen on small engines at my house.
I feel so called out because I'm the exact same way on all engines. But literally, pressure washer. My parents asked if they could borrow it. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if it'll fire up. I haven't used it in a year. Let me throw some octane boost in it, and we'll make it work. And that's all we did, and it ran beautifully.
we'll force it to have life. I understand that when it comes to a vehicle. But on my small equipment, I don't know, man. When it comes to small equipment, I am like super anal about it.
Yeah.
That's funny. Because I always have been when we talk about our tractors, Craftsman versus.
I'm going to take a little better care of the new tractor.
Sure,
but
sure,
the
you
old
say that
ones.
now.
Yeah, I was gonna say for
You
the
say
first
that
year,
Yeah.
and then after that, it'll be well, I'll get around to it. Well, I got to do this
Well,
first.
It's a little more costly to repair that one. The old John Deere, it'll just soldier on the oil of 3 years ago, and
It's true.
It is true.
I
It
think
is
I've
true.
replaced the blades on mine once.
Oh,
I know you do it every year.
Okay. Moving on. So we had this conversation about ethanol treatments versus ethanol-free fuel. I genuinely don't believe folks who are listening in that it is necessary for you to prioritize finding an ethanol-free pump and pumping that into your modern-day vehicle. And when I say modern day, I genuinely mean anything manufactured after 2007, 2008. We really see ethanol being prevalent at that time.
I'll even go back to say 2099 somewhere in there. You're probably okay.
Especially because we had been playing with ethanol in fuel, but we had the ethanol boom in the quote-unquote Great Recession of 2007. So understanding that that's where it becomes, certainly the bell curve of society becomes inundated and we're really aware of ethanol.
And I have two things to add, at least for the pumps I frequent with the 36. If it's ethanol free, it's actually 89 rated fuel for octane. And there was a disclaimer in my research that said that 93 has no less ethanol than 87.
Right.
It's purely does not have pre-det versus the 87. It's just has a better octane.
And that's why I run the higher the premium fuel in my higher compression engines with an ethanol treatment.
Now,
I'm not blinded by the fact. I know there's ethanol in it, and that's why I'm trying to use a product that I think is doing something valuable.
Now, like Jeff brought up last week, it is common for your bigger like Shell and Sunoco and Speedway.
And Speedway, we're going to talk about.
I know we are. But anyway, it is very common for them to put more additives in their higher octane fuel. They give you a little more bang for your buck, make you feel a little bit better about coming out your wallet a little bit more.
Sure. Of course, as I kind of felt, I think that there's a, we talked about it. When you add additives per the gallon, you are depreciating the overall volume of the original fuel that's
you
in
pay
there.
attention to the per gallon. You don't just dump the bottle in.
I'm talking about coming out of the pump, right?
I become a chef when I add additives after the fact.
You become a chef.
Just a little pinch of that, a little pinch of that.
And what's funny is I obsessively use cetane booster in my diesels. Obsessively use it.
Let's let Jeff go through the comments, and then I want to come back to cetane. As a newbie diesel guy, you need to educate me on cetane.
But let's talk about the comments and diesel here for a moment here. Listening to the love for Speedway on last week's episode reminded me of how the one local to me managed to fill their regular tanks with diesel last year. This issue wasn't discovered until after the morning rush.
Oh, no.
Luckily for me, I was running late and skipped stopping for gas.
Oh.
So what happens when diesel gets in your gas engine? We've dealt with that here.
We have. And it's
we
kind of
saved
funny
the vehicle.
when the rumor, the guy that has the Marvel Mystery all stocked on his shelf and has the rumor mill going, he thinks your motor blows up. It actually doesn't. It just comes to a quick halt. It's not happy.
No.
Lots of check engine lights. You have to drain the fuel system of its entirety. You then need to put some very good fuel in there and purge the lines. And then you get to drive your vehicle again. It's expensive because there's lots of cleaning, and newer gas tanks don't have drain spots. You obviously should not do this on a regular. But it's actually worse to do it the other way. Put gas in a diesel. More bad things are going to happen. Your pocketbook's going to hurt far more doing the other. Now, obviously, There may or may not be a depreciation of fuel pumps and that kind of stuff. I kind of don't believe that myself personally, because it's a pump. It's going to pump things.
I was going to say, I've seen the argument online where these guys break down like the pump is going to be, you know, the lubricity of diesel is higher than gasoline. And
so
blah,
it's
blah,
actually
blah.
better for the pump, right?
Right? And I just feel like you're just being argumentative to be
Yes.
argumentative on the internet. You know?
Because in that situation, there's no metric for that. Because did the fuel pump just fail early, or did it fail because of this experience? Did that fuel pump was it a Wednesday fuel pump and it was just given all the love and care at the factory, and now it's going to care not what it pumps?
Right.
There's too many variables.
Specifically in our situation, I'm trying to break down, and I kind of remember being overseeing that conversation a little bit, and the individual who pumped diesel into their
mother's vehicle.
Yep. So we definitely had we pulled the injectors off.
Yep.
With the expectation that we wanted to purge that line.
Yep.
I think, if I recall, we actually pulled the line first before the injectors. We pulled it at the rail and did our best to pump out the tank.
Correct.
Yes.
We actually, we pumped out the tank because, again, we're not scared of the fuel pumps. And if anything, diesel has a higher lubricity than gasoline.
Yes.
And so we pumped the tank out because they had filled the tank up with diesel.
To the tippy top.
To top, right?
It was impressive.
And so we used the fuel pump to pump it out to a degree, ran a hose off that, and then we were able to actually drop the tank. From there, I want to say we had pulled the injectors and we attempted to pump independently using whatever was left in the line. I'm trying to remember exactly how we pumped. We attempted to bring...
We had good gas that we pumped through it.
We pumped good gas through it.
Yeah,
at some
we had
point.
sacrificial couple gallons of fuel.
We did do a
once
couple
we did a
sacrificial.
full clean, because you can't.
But I'm trying to remember, because I feel, and I'm sorry to interrupt you guys, I feel like we pulled the plugs and we pulled the fuel pump relay so that the vehicle wouldn't pump anything or wouldn't start.
Yep.
And we tried to blow out the cylinders, and that's how I would manage it today. So I'm assuming that's how we managed it then.
Yes.
And within good reason, folks, you can pull all your spark plugs and have the fuel pump relay. Obviously,
I think we ended up replacing spark plugs in that situation too, just to be safe.
I think a better safe than sorry situation, and it was a situation of we're already there. The labor doesn't care whether we put
and
junk
I think
parts
that
back
vehicle
in or new parts.
was in the vicinity of needing them anyways.
Yes.
So it's like, you know what, we're here, let's change them.
But if I remember right, once we purged the lines, we had some sacrificial gallons. We went ahead and ran through. We got rid of that. It pretty much fired right up.
Oh, it was beautiful.
It fired it up,
And-
cleared out a couple codes. O2 sensors were one of the things that there
They
was
were a little angry.
concern about. But once we cleared the codes and it had an opportunity to do a burn cycle, that Jeep was none the wiser. It was perfectly fine.
Yep.
So it's not out of the question. And again, putting gas in a diesel, unintended consequences. And again, we're using compression for combustion. Gas simply doesn't have the same behaviors. It's more volatile in that sense. And also, it is going to be, diesel has a high solvency content, and you can clean with diesel just the same as you can clean with gasoline. We kind of talked about that in the last podcast. But again, it's more harsh on the internal components of the diesel than it is.
I've heard like
diesel fuel.
injection pumps for diesels that have seen gas as bad juju.
Right. I think that, and just on a super minutia level, the viscosity of gasoline is thinner yet than diesel, and so it's going to permeate seals and O-rings and injector orifices way different than diesel fuel will.
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, I like that most stations, the diesel pump nozzle is a different size, so it makes it more difficult to mix up. But I am going to stand on this and say, I hate you, BP, because you have green pumps.
Yes.
Why?
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
Makes it confusing for people.
Doesn't make sense to me.
I have seen too many people make mistakes because of
It was very confusing.
simple things like that.
It was a very confusing situation when it comes to specifically good old British Petroleum.
So what is cetane?
I have no idea.
Oh,
I have no
that was
idea.
anticlimactic.
I was going to say, you asked me, and I thought, how am I going to handle this situation other than...
I am offended for how much diesel you have had.
Other than I totes looked into it some years ago, and it had a very similar explanation as the Startron, and I thought, Well, that's good enough for me. Because there's
It's a dehydrator.
so here's the thing. I know factually, and there's a whole bunch of for the
I'm
diesel
surprised
guys
Jeff's
out
not
there.
over there juggling.
Right. So it is.
I don't own
somehow-
anything diesel. I'm not worried about it.
Somehow it works
Oh.
on the same concept level as octane, right? Octane booster. That you are somehow encouraging a better or more fuller combustion rate through this. Now, what I can confidently say, because in the diesel world we have an anticoagulant or an anti-gel that you're supposed to run in your diesel in the winter, and then we have a cetane booster which they recommend mixing in as well. When, and again, I think we looked this up before, but it was like 2015, 2017, somewhere in there, when we went to the ultra low sulfur diesel fuel. My 2003 Cummins was unhappy, and the only thing that makes it happy is the cetane booster, and obviously the sulfur, it adds a lubricant to the fuel itself. It's a heavy particulate. Now, the reason that we went to ultra low sulfur fuel is because we can mitigate the particulate out the tailpipe,
Right.
by not introducing it into the fuel system. But factually, my truck rattled and clattered more like an old school diesel than a fuel injected one, or a multi-rail that it is.
Yeah.
And so, I ran a cetane boost. Now, the CRDs, anything that's a modern day diesel is meant to run on ultra low sulfur.
Right.
And then, from there we have regen cycles and DEF filters and so on and so forth for
Yes.
capturing any additional particulate that's expelled. But certainly where I found personal value was in my engine that wasn't meant to run on ultra low sulfur fuel. So again, my understanding is that cetane is much like octane. It's a combustion rate, but for me, it's not about combustion. It was about lubricity.
Now, I have a feeling that Scott actually has all the information, which is why I didn't bother.
No,
to
he has no
jiggle.
idea.
You have no idea.
He didn't look up.
You had all your notes.
I told you what my notes were.
He
from.
told us. He told us
I
he
know,
was
but
looking
I
it up on
still-
ethanol
Oh,
and octane and
man.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right. So part of this conversation, in part, was also because a few weeks back, somebody we had briefly tiptoed into LPG, and I do want to spend a couple minutes before we transition our day and talk about some of these alternative fuel sources. Now, we had a whole conversation about hydrogen just 3-4 episodes ago. So I don't think we spend a ton of hydrogen time, other than I did see another engine reach patent approval and production value. I couldn't tell you which manufacturer it was. I looked at it, I said, oh, that's nice, and I moved on with life.
Yeah.
Because whatever, I feel like whatever the next great engine is, none of them are perpetual motion engines, so whatever. Let's just keep inventing things until one sticks. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on hydrogen. We did that already. But let's talk a little bit about LPG.
So one thing that I thought was most interesting as a young person, kind of starting into maintaining LPG vehicle forklifts,
Sure.
is how undark the oil was. Basically, it looked like you put it in
Sure.
after when you're taking it out, because you don't have the carbon crossover from the fuel into the oil. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand, why your oil gets dark in your just everyday vehicle, is because of the leftover carbon from the fuel combustion process actually gets into the oil, and over time that builds up, and that's why you should not do 3-year oil changes on your John Deere like I do.
Oh boy.
But that's why it gets dark. Where you have an LPG vehicle or forklift, the oil does not do that because of the different fuel.
And just for those who are listening at home and in general, LPG is liquid propane gas. If you were not familiar. It's King of the Hill style stuff here.
Now,
Yes.
I am going to interrupt and go back and say that I did just Google.
I was
cetane
waiting.
Thank
for
you.
to. Yes.
So cetane is literally the diesel equivalent of octane. It's a measurement of the fuel
That's
detonation.
what you said.
Right.
Thank you, Jeffrey. That was
Yeah.
good.
So you were 100% spot on.
Okay. I appreciate the confirmation.
And hopefully next time I tell him to Google something, he takes me serious.
I really, you asked or you said you were surprised
Jeff
I wasn't.
thought you were bringing your A game.
I
He
really
not
did.
realize-
I was
He
prepared.
was not ready that the master was going to become the student. I think.
I was a vintage guy, and I brought vintage information. He's
but
the diesel
obviously
guy,
not-
and I expected
obviously
him to
not,
have diesel information.
Yeah, vintage diesel stuff on his part.
When does he bring the scientific facts, though?
Oh!
Ouch!
Oh!
Dang!
Oh!
You're the mad scientist for a reason.
Ouch!
Oh
Now,
my God!
He has the facts in his head, but he doesn't have all of
But
them.
I've
Like, you
only had a diesel
prepare
for
notes and ready to go.
almost a month. I haven't had to go. I'm going down the rabbit hole. I haven't got that far yet, though.
Nathan's asking about CNG and it burning cleaner than gas.
Yeah, so compressed natural gas and LPG, kind of in my mind,
They're similar-ish.
right? They are two roads that cross into one.
They're not exactly the same.
They are not the same at all, right? So, and CNG is actually hugely used. excuse me, hugely used with population dense areas, commercial transit systems. So.
buses, that kind of stuff.
Right, buses. There's a number of fleet vehicles within, again, population dense urban areas.
Personally, here it was the gas company.
Correct.
They all their fleet vehicles ran on that. They had their own fueling station at the headquarters. But that was the only place I knew of where you could even get that, and it was only for them.
Correct.
So that is the biggest challenge with that, at least in our area,
Right.
is unless you were somehow filling it up at home, you didn't have an option.
Yeah. So I'm going to encourage this conversation, and first and foremost, kind of say that our extension of knowledge of LPG and CNG are going to be from. Granted, what we bring to the table is our own nerding out nature of the fact that I actually give a fig about what inner city Pittsburgh uses for their bus station fuel systems. I actually care. I read those reports. I think it's interesting when the Port Authority does those releases, so on and so forth. And that's the knowledge. We can go back to the early 90s when LPG became a viable fuel source for the off-road industry.
Yep.
When MPI, multi-port injection, was just kind of new and throttle body wasn't getting the job done at that time.
Correct.
And carburetators were still the volume of vehicles
you
on
had,
the road.
You had, back in those days, you had some old guy that had this little critique here and this little thing there that he did to his carburetor and claimed it would then run upside down.
Correct.
Physics
Tell us that's not the case.
That's not the case. But there was like this whole little, oh, this is the way you do this,
Right.
and you pass that knowledge from one
If
to the
there
other.
was a guy in your club, he claimed that.
Yes.
And everybody else was like, okay.
I've heard everything from like little doors in fuel bowls to changing jet things and all kinds of stuff.
We do not possess that science
No,
knowledge.
the
or nobody
results
passed
may
up-
vary.
Yeah.
Where LP, I remember it coming out in most of the mags
Yep.
back in the day that it would run pretty much at any angle you cared to run because it's under pressure.
Correct. So let's get back to that in a second, right? And
Yep.
I love that the sentiment. We'll leave it there. And what I was saying is that we're not the experts on LPG and CNG at that point. We bring to the table our own volition, our own interest, kind of the above average consumer of that information. Pressure is a big piece. The tanks are pressurized, right? Whereas your standard gasoline or diesel, it's just a reservoir, and
Yes.
we're pumping off the reservoir. Whereas, again, compressed natural gas and liquid propane are reasonably pressurized in the tank themselves.
So basically, the layman's terms, our gas pretty much, unless there's a hole in the bottom where gravity can act on it, it's going to be content to just sit there unless the pump is then pressurizing it after the fact.
Correct.
I think
Where-
the simplest thing is if you knock off your fill tank, the gas just leaks out. If you knock off the nozzle on a propane tank, you have a rocket.
Yeah, it's going somewhere.
It's the simplest explanation there.
Pretty much.
So
That's what I was trying to
leave
say.
it to Jeffrey to,
Yeah.
to build rockets. Out
Got
of
me the elbow in the face and was like, I will just take this
I
from
will
here.
take that from here.
Explosives, of course.
Yeah, right.
So anyway, Nathan was saying that the local waste management trucks run on CNG where he's at.
Sure. And so the interesting piece, and I want to circle back to the LPG running upside down.
We're
and
also
so on and
like
so
at
forth.
the end of the episode.
Totes.
just FYI.
The challenge with those systems is that specifically those fuels have the least amount of lubricity. Therefore, they require the hardest valve seats and internal valve train. And this is kind of the line in the sand, the do not collect $200, do not pass go situation. You can run a standard gas engine, most standard gasoline engines, on some form of LPG or CNG, some type of natural gas, or in that sense, you can. But longevity will be wildly depreciated because of the tight tolerances and the metallurgy, the actual hardness rating of the specific metals used in the internals of the engine itself. The biggest thing when it comes to the specific with, say, the pistons themselves, you have your piston wall, you have your piston rings. Standard fuels have lubricants in them, and they lubricate the piston rings and the wall, and they allow a lack of blow by because of lubricity, right? We have this thin layer of lubricant or a little bit of oily nature that does not allow the fuel to pass by those rings. Likewise, that lubricity allows the piston to operate efficiently without building up entirely too much heat. The challenge when it comes to our more gaseous or vaporous gases is the fact that they lack all of that. So you have increased cylinder wall wear, ring wear, fuel bypass. It goes into the fuel. You don't have the carbon that you were mentioning, but you can easily have an inefficiency, and you have a heat increase. Also, your valve seats simply aren't hard enough. So retrofitting a standard gasoline engine to one of our more vaporous fuels presents challenges. Now, what's interesting about our old school multi-fuel vehicles is they were actually, much like a flex fuel vehicle, they were simply built with the hardened components so that you could then use a lesser fuel, but you didn't have to use the LPG or something similar.
And I can see where a more shade tree mechanic can be confused by that part, because you go and you look at fork trucks. That's the easiest way for anybody to be experienced with this. And you're going to see old flathead motors. You're going to see Continental motors. You're going to see the one I worked on was a slant 6 for a bigger forklift. They have older technology. And I think in those situations, first, we don't know what rings they're using. We don't know what pistons are using.
Right.
But everybody knows what it takes to kill an inline 6 motor or an old school 4 in a row Continental motor. They're pretty darn robust. And I think that's where people kind of miss that part. And they're like, oh, well, if that's good enough for that, it's good enough for like my small block Chevy. Well, what does your small block Chevy have for parts inside?
Right.
So
additionally, the RPMs that we're operating a small block Chevy and that we're running a Continental 4 or 6 cylinder, which actually share a lot of design structure similarities to the Hurricanes and the 134s and so on and so forth, are just different, right?
Yes.
Application use. Folks, this has been a banger. We promised to be done with fuel additives, gasoline squared.
No, we don't.
For at least a few episodes.
Okay,
I could
that's
totally
probably
get
true.
jazzed up. I'm all jazzed up. I want to talk about
I'm gonna put a bet out there that our listeners have to listen. I bet within the next 2 episodes you make some kind of fuel reference.
Oh, that's gonna be so hard.
Because now he doesn't want to do it.
Oh,
I
now
know.
I don't want to do it.
I know, but I'm gonna make sure that you do because I know how to set you up. And get you started.
Right. All right. Well, they're twisting me. Now, I hear just from a brief conversation you and I had over the weekend that you have once again put together the world's worst transition.
It has been a while, and you said you wanted a transition for this, and I was like, I should do something, and then I went, okay, I'm going to be obnoxious about it.
Oh, of course you are. So, as we are trying to add in, because of you, our listeners, our viewers have made available to us this awesome. You've made sense for us to reinvest in this awesome podcast studio space. It is now available to us to do some alternative time interviews, meaning we can have an individual come in the afternoon, the evening. Because we are a high functioning working shop, that was not always the case, because you'd hear Greg and his favorite tool, the air hammer, and Scott grinding away or painting something right in our way. And it was very distracting. But now we can do some alternative time frame interviews, which then should help bring in some additional people and some alternative perspectives. So this is one of the first of 2025. Happens to be my sister, whom I regard very dearly and very highly. She helped kind of formulate this business with me many years ago. She was a prolific and decorated wheeler, and we've cut down the interview to about how long, Jeffrey?
Davey did that. I have no idea.
All right. I don't know, 6-7 minutes.
I have no idea. I just downloaded it this morning and said, all right, I'll put it on.
Okay. And
I haven't even watched it, and I was in the interview.
Whoa, buddy. Okay. So we have the extended version, and our Patrons, if they haven't already seen that, have that available to them. Eventually, we'll make that available to the general listening, viewing public, but not quite yet. That's regarded for our Patrons. And now the condensed version for you.
Your brother Neil is the owner of SFJ 4x4 and the primary host of I Speak Jeep. He's a huge figure in the Jeep community and obviously a large passion for Jeeps.
Yeah.
How has that influenced or supported you in your journey in creating this book?
Yeah. So I like to tease him that I was first. Where is he at? He's going to point at me.
He can't hear you.
Yeah,
right
I know.
now.
Okay, good. Okay. That'll be later. It'll be out before he can have a chance to respond. So Neil's 5. I'm 5 years older than Neil. And we joke around because just, the difference of our ages, I always tease like I had a Jeep first. Like when I was in college, I literally got an extra job, and that job's sole purpose was so I could get the money to buy my first Jeep, and joined Jeep clubs and went off-roading and did more actively first, mostly just because of age. Now where we're at this point in our life, where our priorities have switched and gears and stuff, but I like to tease him, especially for a while there, that I was like, yeah, I'm first, bro. Like
Absolutely.
So like I had to have something there, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So of course he's incredibly supportive, and to be honest, like the purple Jeep, which is my dream Jeep, and I know everybody has different goals of what they want as a dream Jeep.
Right.
My little TJ, my purple TJ is my dream Jeep. Like that was my dream Jeep. And so as far as Neil's concerned, I think one of the things I really, really appreciate is that he made that dream a reality for me. And I absolutely couldn't thank him enough, because I did get to a point where I didn't have the time and where it was in my life and the resources and the tools to build what I wanted to build. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without him and his business and his connections and his drive and support to build that dream Jeep, which is really the main character of my book.
I was just going to say, and your Jeep
My
is a
purple
character
Jeep
in the Jeep.
is the main character of the Jeep.
Yep. Yeah.
So
The book's back cover mentioned how it captures the sight, sounds, and feel of Jeeping.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us more about how you brought the sensory adventure to life in the story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a very sensory person. I'm kind of loud and boisterous, and I like sounds. And to me, in hearing is an important one for me. I don't know, I mean, it's different ones, people react differently. But I use a lot of alliteration, and I use a lot of onomatopoeia. So I talk about when you're off-roading, and anybody that's been off-roading, there's sounds and I remember, and it's funny because part of the inspiration from this book came from when I took a friend with me off-roading who had never been before, and the first hill we went over, my Jeep started making those noises that it makes, like where your springs kind of creak and something kind of pops, and there's like creaking noises and popping noises, and he was like, is it supposed to do that? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like that's the sound of off-roading.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the people that don't off-road, your Jeep doesn't make those noises on your daily life in a regular, off-road.
Right.
And
Because
so
you're not flexing them at the same level, and
exactly.
sometimes it's the sound of rocks dragging as you're
100%.
just sliding over them.
Yep. Or, a body armor hitting a rock or a tree or something with a little clunk. So again, that's a fun part of the off-road experience to me. And that was just where that idea came from. And so then started to build, what would it be like? And reading to kids and using onomatopoeia, using noises and like and like making squeak. It's a fun way to read to little kids and like help them experience the adventure.
Yeah.
So,
Now, the book itself is a very fun read aloud experience. And my question would be, what has the feedback been from families and young readers who have experienced it together?
yeah, I love when people get a hold of me like on my Facebook page or something and say, hey, we got your book and my kids love reading it. And again, it's a really fun way for parents to read out loud and connect to their kids, especially if you're somebody that's familiar with those sounds of off-roading. And I even have, like when a stranger that, somebody I don't know and from a different state, and they reached out and this mom was like, my kid loves your book, like such a fan, and we're an off-roading family. And I think that's another thing too, for my experiences with off-roading and where I was as a very young woman trying to do it, trying to build a Jeep, trying to go off-roading, try to have these adventures, and kind of felt a little bit of an underrepresented part of that off-roading experience was maybe some of the children and women.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that people are reaching out to me and saying like, this helps like make that connection to these Jeeping families that have that same experience or want that experience, that is important to me. So I just, even one of my friends, she was saying that her son for a couple years now was like, it's his favorite book. He just loves Jeeps and trucks and, that kind of like bashing and bumbling and that kind of, spirit. He just loves reading it over and over. It's like his favorite book to read. So I love that. It warms my heart.
That's awesome.
Folks, that book is available on our website, on our merchandise site. In store, you can come into our showroom. We typically have a copy or two on hand, and you obviously can log on to Amazon and buy that book as well. But we would prefer you to buy it, direct from the source, if you will, from us. And equally, while you're on the merchandise site, check out our beanies. Not the one that I have on my head currently, but we have the patch beanie, very popular. Had a very positive review come in on that over the weekend. So you get yourself a book and a beanie and kind of, weather the oncoming winter storm in the next week or so. Was there something else I was supposed to share with them, Jeffrey?
Well, the full interview is on Patreon.
That is.
So if you're not on Patreon yet, that's another reason to sign up.
Why not? Get on there and see. Equally, we may be talking about...
we just got informed. Barnes & Noble as well. If you're at Barnes & Noble and would like to purchase that book there, it's available in Barnes & Noble.
Perfect. And if you're on that Patreon, you may be seeing a fun, ridiculous rescue, winter rescue that happened last week as well. We got a lot of personal stuff that has happened, so I think that... this is as good a time as ever to depart, but make sure you check out the merch site and online to find that book and kind of be entertained by, fun off-roading with your family, even when you're not able to go outside. We got a lot of Jeeps to work on. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. If you want to hang around for our personal stuff, you can stay on. Otherwise, depart for the day. Enjoy yourself. Stay safe in the winter weather and Jeep on.
Keep on.
Jeep on.
Is that goat sound so the sheep sound goat sheep whatever, is that still
Oh
audible?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Those people at home are so lucky.
I know.
I
Actually,
love
Bill referenced that as possibly the worst transition as the goat, but I think I've topped that.
I don't know because I couldn't hear it, producer.
No, I just mean with some of the other transitions
In general.
in general.
Perfect. Well, I for one, I kind of teased that, if you're on Patreon, there's probably going to be a short or a video available to you very soon about potentially the world's worst snow rescue that I went and did last week.
This was, you were like, hey, I got to go help Mom real quick. It was Thursday, right?
I must have
Yeah,
been.
because Scott wasn't here.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're like, I got to go help her real quick. And you and Davey left, and I didn't really know
What was going on?
what was going on. And then I get a text like 20 minutes later, I need you. And I'm like, cool, where? Nothing.
Radio silence.
So I'm like-
true Neil fashion.
I'm like, all right, I'll start locking up the shop and
Jeff
figure
was
this
just
out.
like soldiering on. He's like, all right, well, I'm gonna have to go.
Then I
bail
tried
Neil out."
calling him after I got everything ready that I could just leave. Nothing. No answer. I'm like, whatever. Just sit here and keep working. And then he messages, we got it.
We're all good.
We're all good. I'm like, okay.
If you're on my personal social, run over there to their Facebook and follow along for whatever.
All I'm going to say is somebody was making fun of your Crocs. They're going to light you on fire about this.
They're gonna light me on fire. Yeah, I will just kind of give the short version of it. I got a call from my dad, and he was like, "Your mom is at a meeting at kind of this location. It's the art center, and she's at a meeting, and her van is stuck in a snowdrift, and we can't get it unstuck, and I've got to run out. If there's any way that you can get her taken care of, great. If not, such as life, we'll have to figure it out later. That's part of living in the snow belt or in any type of inclement situation.
I'm sure Dad did not expect you to show up in what you showed up in.
No, God, no.
No. He messaged us at a Jeep shop with all the Jeeps and winches possible.
Yes.
And what does he decide to take?
Well,
Pick the most unworthy tow vehicle.
unworthy. I was ready. I was so mentally ready.
To push it out, not to try to pull it out with.
No, I was going in to soldier it, and I knew that I was going to get those vehicles out no matter what. Like
Confidence was
it
too
was
high.
it was just confidence. It was straight
obviously
confidence.
wasn't too high because they got it.
They both got out, right? So here's the thing, and
They both got out. That's the key.
they both got out.
Wait a minute, only one was stuck. When we
Only
started.
one was stuck when we started this call.
well, at least with both vehicles, you had 4 tires sort of driving.
No. I will just say this, and my gosh. So Davey and I were supposed to be shooting some video for an upcoming YouTube, and I wanted to honor our time that we were supposed to be doing with him. And he said, well, hey, if they're stuck, they're stuck. I said, okay, well, that sounds like an opportunity to me to shoot some video. So we took to go rescue my mother, our Mini Cooper, little supercharged
S model
Mini Cooper.
Yeah,
And
it's mini, all right.
It's mini, and Davey and I, which are not mini, piled in it and headed down to get the vehicles unstuck. Now I pulled up, and the van was solidly bottomed out in said snowdrift, and to-ish my mom's credit, like you really couldn't tell. It was a sneaky snowdrift. Now, if she would have just stayed a little bit to the left, she would have been perfectly fine. Now, I say that because that's how I read the terrain. So, since I was so emboldened in my confidence, I decided that I would actually drive up and around through said little snowdrift, but I would go the left. I would pick the left line of the path, if you will, which, of course, with Davey and I as ballast weight in the Mini Cooper with its little 14-inch wheels with low pro tires, we, in fact, did make it positively in front of the van. And then through the process of whooping on this van and beating it for everything that it owes us, I was able to unstick it naturally from its habitat. Because I was so overly confident at that point in time, I decided that I was going to back the Mini Cooper back out of that location.
Through there, the van was stuck.
But I was not going to go the path of least resistance, which would have made the most sense, which is how the line that I took in, but that I was going to show the world for daring to offend me, and I was going to back the Mini Cooper straight through the snowdrift that had already swallowed the van.
Mm-hmm.
And it promptly swallowed the Mini Cooper.
It did not work out in my favor. Now, I will just do a quick PSA, and I'll leave you with that, folks, and know that both vehicles did eventually get out. You can see that on my social media. If you are one of our Patreons, you're going to get to watch the video of both vehicles. We did not actually end up shoveling them. The neighbors came over and tried to help very graciously. Like,
Well, they
good
showed
Samaritan.
you showed up in a Mini Cooper, so like they need
Oh my
help.
God. It was so funny seeing people's responses being like, you know, if you can only imagine, like we've all done it. We've all sat at the, like in a Walmart parking lot or a grocery store or the mall, and we've watched like people in like incorrect footwear walk in on the ice or through the snow or pushing a cart that's like way overloaded. And you're like, oh, I know that's going to fall off any minute. You're waiting for the ball to drop, you know?
You garnered a crowd of people waiting for you to screw up.
Waiting for me to fail, to screw up.
And then you
know?
stuck the Mini.
And I was, and then a guy comes over and he's got like a cup of salt or ice melt, and he's a shovel, and he starts shoveling. And I can only imagine it was like the old man grumbling under his breath situation. He was,
I'll fix it.
I'll fix it. You know, stupid yahoos for showing up in a Mini Cooper, driving it in this weather, da 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 da. You know. And I stood back for a second, and I said, you know, you really, thank you, sir. You don't really have to do that. You know, I had to like kind of break character, if you will, for a second. And he was like, he didn't hear me. I said, you know, excuse me, you really don't have to do that. And he kind of whips around. He's like, what? I'm just trying to help you. And I was like, I get that, but we're kind of doing a thing here. Like, I could get us out. Like, it's okay. And I kind of like pointed at Davey with the camera, and the guy was like, oh, you guys are doing this on purpose. And I was like, yeah, I'm not worried, dude. I did have a moment of existential crisis, which is when I text you, because I was like, oh, like time is getting away from me now, and like it was the work day, and I didn't exactly want to be
Sticking a Mini Cooper in a
snowdrift for that long, but then it kind of kept working. This is my PSA, because I watched somebody else get stuck in an all-wheel drive vehicle while I took my kids to school this morning. Traction control is not your friend once you're stuck. So our vehicles are too smart, and they reduce power from wheel slippage, which makes sense in your everyday driving experience. But when it comes to when you are stuck and you are trying to utilize your vehicle as a tool or as an extension of your driver's skill, traction control impedes your ability to do so. And I just think too many people don't know that about modern vehicles. And so that's my PSA out to people, is that virtually I have yet to see a vehicle that you cannot turn off traction control. I feel like you have to be able to do that in every single vehicle.
So that's not always true.
I was going to say, I have yet to see a vehicle that you can't turn off traction control.
Do you know the JLJTs, you can shut it off, but it doesn't actually turn all the way off?
And that's the thing, is like, that's all I'm saying, is that there is some type of momentary override that is giving me more direct input to how my vehicle is behaving than the complete computer control that is traction control. You're right. There is still... It's just like manual shifting a transmission. I can't actually force it into first gear and run 70 miles per hour down the highway. I understand what you're saying, but you can still go in and you can force more wheel slippage if that's going to help you bite through the ice or dig down to where there's traction or get that little 3 inches of mobility where you can kind of start to rock the vehicle back and forth.
Yeah.
I watched a vehicle absolutely stuck for no other reason other than the fact that it would start to move and then the wheel would slip. And then you would see the brake immediately engage it today. And I was taking my daughter to school, and I thought, do I stop and just like offer a friendly piece of advice at the risk of like my daughter being late to school? And I thought, you know what? If they're still stuck when I come back in, I'll do my part. But at that point in time, there was just absolutely no reason this all-wheel drive should have been stuck, other than the fact that the vehicle was not doing what the driver was trying to tell it to do. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's my PSA. The last piece I'll say is on my social right now from the weekend. I had an opportunity to head back to the mountains. The mountains called me, and I went. I took my son and we took my current cheap Jeep on a little road and trail excursion, and it spoke to my heart, and I had a great time. So head over there to my page and see what that's all about as well. You guys?
So sort of fitting. How long after Davey so generously gave me a purple strap did I have to use?
Oh no!
I may or may not have gotten too close to the ditch with the new tractor,
Oh, you flew too close to the sun.
and may have dropped the driver's side front tire into the ditch. And I was like, I have a bucket. It'll be okay.
Yeah.
I'll just use the bucket to push me out. To which tractor said no.
Really?
I tried the rear diff lock. That said no. So I was like,
Sounds
fine.
sounds
At this
like-
point, the tractor's starting to list, and the back tire is off the ground. And as all everyone here pretty much knows, if you don't have a locker, you just have one tire that's spinning in the front and one tire that's spinning in the air in the back.
Yes.
So I just pulled up the Gladiator and hooked the purple strap and yanked it out.
What I heard is that you need to stick it in the ditch a couple more times and learn how to use that bucket to get yourself out.
Something.
Huh.
I was like, really? Already?
Yeah. That's
Not
funny.
even a month in, I already got it in the ditch.
Well,
That's funny.
I will say, A, I'm not surprised.
Right.
But B, I'm a little more surprised that it wasn't me first and it's you. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
that
fair.
that is the most surprising part of that.
Right. That's I feel like. Now, did you pull your belly mower off yours, or are you still
Yes.
driving? Okay.
That was the very first thing I did.
I couldn't imagine you were still driving around with, I don't know, 11 feet of snow in our area
No.
with the belly mower on.
No,
I was wondering if it was high centered on the ditch, you know what I mean, as your
No.
breakover angle happens.
No, it was purely front tire was in the air. I was
Yeah.
basically sitting on the bucket, and once I picked up the bucket, the tractor just went whoop into the ditch more, which then took the rear tire off the ground.
Oh, because you affected your weight, your balance of
Yeah.
sorts.
I definitely need ballast, but holy crap, stuff is expensive for
Davey and I are available for rent.
So
Well, and that was the thing, is that I felt like when I went to back out purposely through the snowdrift, Davey was out filming. So that's just how critically important Davey is to my daily operations,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I was without him, and that's when I got stuck. So clearly that was my problem.
makes perfect sense.
But in the future, we're available for rent. We can come and hang off the back of your tractor for you.
We've done it to the mail truck a couple
I was gonna
times.
say, I've done it to the mail truck here at the shop.
A couple times.
I think I've definitely surfed on top of your Dub J years ago.
you did.
Shirtless and shoeless, if I
you
recall.
did. That was Amy driving, though.
Well, tomato,
Yeah, same
potato. It's the same
But
thing.
I did spend the rest of the weekend looking at more aggressive tires and ballast. And
Oh, Greg's
course you
going to
did.
eat that
Oh,
up. He's-
yeah.
oh,
The
oh,
tires. You had turf tires on it.
Turf tires? You should have negotiated ag tires or industrial.
Something.
Yeah.
So, anyways, Saturday we decided to take a look at my Gladiator to see what that rear end noise is.
Yeah, I wanted-
put it up on jacks and put it in drive, and just let the wheels kind of turn. And Scott was under with a stethoscope, and he's like, "No, it all sounds the same." And me and Greg are like, "That doesn't sound good." And we were able to basically determine it's most likely just needs rebearing. I pulled the diff cover.
Did you pull the cover? Okay.
And it was underwhelming. It was glittery. It was glittery, and there was
the
some chunks in
magnet
there.
was very glittery.
Yeah, but
Fascinating.
the gears, everything looked appropriate. No major wear, so bearings. And
Weird.
Scott's like, "How does that even happen? You're only at 76,000 miles or whatever it is." And Greg's like, "Well, he uses it as a 3/4 ton pickup truck." I'm like,
That is
"That's
true.
true."
Fair. That's fair. That is fair. I mean, I think it's been loaded and towed and
Yeah.
side loads and then wheeled hard. I get it.
Yep.
And mine is, why do I have a head and a head gasket issue in Jen's wall crawler?
Well, that's because you never shut it off. but-
Well,